Welcome to Table Talk here at the Philadelphia Sports Table Podcast Show, the longest running weekly Philly sports podcast show in the world. You're hearing that it's a bit echoey in here right now. I am not in my studio, but we wanted to get this Table Talk interview show out to you all because of what is happening with this Philadelphia Phillies team and where they are going as we are entering September, the last bit of this regular season. There's a lot of interesting storylines to dive into. And again, please forgive the PST podcast show here for the audio and even the video. I'm not in my studio area. We had to be flexible here in terms of our recording, but we have a fantastic guest, and that's all that matters at this particular point. We've got our good friend from PhilliesNation.com, Destiny Lugardo. It's always awesome having you on, Destiny. Thanks for taking the time.
Appreciate it, Jeff. Thank you.
Yes, it's always great talking to you because you have an inside track of what's going on with this team. You're in the clubhouse, you're in the locker room area, you're talking to these players on our Phillies team that you know we just want to see do so well, game in and game out. And I think, you know, as after this past weekend, the Labor Day weekend, I think we're getting to the point in the season here, Destiny, where vibes are so critically important to where this Phillies team is going to be going in the future. We're seeing Schwarber hitting home runs like it's nothing, left and right. It's fantastic to watch. Christopher Sanchez, he's doing his thing from the mound, just shutting down batters. We now have Garrett Stubbs, one of the biggest vibe guys to wear a Phillies uniform, back in the club again. And yes, I know from a batting standpoint, Garrett Stubbs, not the greatest batter in the world, but the vibes are important that he brings. How would you describe these vibes as we're heading into September here? And what do you think it means as someone who's, you know, there in the locker room, like covering this team? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's always an interesting question. I think, as always, the vibes are kind of what you make of them to be, if that makes sense. I would say, especially after the trade deadline, and I think this has more to do with, you know, Durant coming in and having a set closer, and just like in general, the Phillies having a really impactful trade deadline. Things just felt a little bit different, like things were falling into place. It definitely helps to go on a big winning streak after the deadline. But I think like the theme of this year is, you know, it's a lot of the same guys. Like they know who they are, they know how they work together, they have fun together. They know what the goal is and they want to win the World Series. They know what heartbreak feels like. So it's a lot about like getting to business and kind of accomplishing that goal and having fun at the same time. But I think it's like on the outside, you're definitely like seeing a team that's coming together. I think it helps a lot too that they have a lot to play for at this time of year. That's something that we couldn't really say this time last year. They got off to such a great start and then they kind of fizzled closer to the end. They have to play for that second bye in the National League. I think the division, I know like it was a little bit in doubt last week. I think the division is pretty much close to being wrapped up, but they have to get that bye and kind of play out September and kind of see where they are at the end. I think that's kind of a big part of what vibes are too. Like they have to play for something and not just wait for October. I think that was part of the problem too, but yeah, it's just like it's hard to interpret vibes. Like it's easy to say like the vibes are high when they're winning. Like it's a lot of fun to win, and then it's not a lot of fun to lose. So like especially after a game like we saw yesterday, the vibes are pretty high.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And I think one of the reasons why too is like I'm trying to be reflective. And this past week we talked about it on the show about just how Dave Dombrowski, as the guy who's running the ship in the front office, you know, these guys throughout the league. Sometimes they hit on trades. Sometimes they hit on offseason acquisitions. Sometimes they don't hit on these acquisitions. I mean, we've certainly seen that this year in terms of the relief pitching. You know, it's just, oh my gosh, Romano just, of course, they didn't hit on it. But we look at somebody like Harrison Bader and what he has done since coming to Philly. As we know, Dave Dombrowski made this trade with the Twins to help what was an inconsistent lineup throughout this season at that time. And Harrison Bader has made that push for an everyday role in this lineup. And an argument could be made that he's brought some of that consistency that Dave Dombrowski was hoping for. He's brought it to the team to an extent for sure. How do you see Harrison Bader's role moving forward here in September, Destiny? And as we're inching closer to the postseason, do you think that he helps with that consistency in general?
Yeah, I think if you look at the last couple weeks, it's pretty clear that Bader is an everyday player in Rob Thompson's eyes. I believe he started in 14 of the last 17 games, and I know like when they first acquired him, they went for that, 6-day left field, center field platoon. But I think it's pretty clear now, even if he's not hitting the way he is now, he's an everyday player just based off of the defense that he provides in center field. Um, he has like a certain energy to him that nobody else really has. Like it's
Vibes.
confidence. It's like it's vibes too.
Yes.
There's a swagger. It doesn't come off as cocky, but there's like an attitude to him. And I see a lot of like 1993 Phillies comparisons, and I think it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I think the bat has been a lot better than what people expected at the beginning. I know he's having like one of the best offensive seasons of his career, but it feels like he's giving them that, 3-hit, 4-hit night like every other day, basically.
Yeah.
And for a team that really needed some right-handed pop and more just consistency in general from the right-handed hitters, I think he's been a massive addition. So moving forward, like he's the everyday center fielder until even if he starts struggling a little bit here, I think you got to kind of roll with him and kind of optimize for defense in that spot. So he's honestly been their best position player trade deadline acquisition since they got Sosa and Brandon Marsh 3 years ago. I think that's something that they were definitely missing the last couple years, like an infusion of energy into their lineup, just because they haven't really hit on those guys midseason. So yeah, it feels like.
Was that part of the strategy with Dave Dombrowski, do you think? I mean, do you think that was part of it? Again, that energy and that, I don't want to keep calling it vibes, but that energy that was needed, was that part of the strategy aside from the stats?
Yeah, I think like Dombrowski, he's been around a long time. Like I don't need to repeat that cliche for the upkeep time. But yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I think they've like tried to get that in prior years. Like if you even go back to 2 years ago and they traded Bailey Falter for Rodolfo Castro, like if that was a disastrous signing, but I think like in their eyes, like they thought he would bring in some sort of energy. But I think like, they definitely needed better defense in the out. They definitely needed better offense in the outfield. And I think
Yes.
that's what they were going for. And then, if Bader provided that kind of that attitude that the team needed, that those like things, the intangibles that you can't really explain with stats. Like I think that's kind of an added bonus, and that's definitely something that he provided.
And it also seems that Bader coming in too, because he said, coming over from the trade, it's like having that relationship with the guys in the clubhouse. It seems like that's really come together too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Have you seen that behind the scenes?
Yeah. Like I like to think a lot about the outfield just being like a wide array of characters, and every
Yes.
dude is very different from the other guy.
Right.
But like you could definitely see, like you don't even have to be in the clubhouse, like the way he interacts with some of the guys, like Bryce and Trey, and just the handshakes and the jokes and all that stuff. Like it's definitely like something that they've kind of I'm sure they're all like extremely impressed with his play in the outfield and what he's provided to the lineup. But I think like he's definitely, like I said before, like one of these veterans that knows who they are, knows what they can provide. And it's kind of, I don't want to say like a missing piece, because it's been a month. We don't really know how this is going to end, but like he's definitely his presence is definitely welcomed in that clubhouse.
Yeah. I'm glad we're talking about positive stuff on this podcast, because, man, last week it was coming off the Mets being up at Citi Field and then just not being able to beat the Mets up there. And it was just last week talking about this team was just kind of rough. But I'm glad we're on a positive note here, because I want to talk about now a great piece that you wrote on PhilliesNation.com about how Trea Turner's all-around excellence this season should lead to some MVP consideration around the league. I mean, something we've talked about on this podcast platform, and you mentioned it in your article, was how many of us were thinking about what his future at shortstop would be because of his defense just not being the best. I mean, we've kind of known this for a while now, but this year, I mean, he's grown exponentially as a defender, even at this stage of his career. Do you really think that he's going to be within that MVP consideration at the end of this season, Destiny? Why or why not?
Yeah, like I don't think he'll ultimately win MVP. It's probably Otani's award to lose, and
Yeah,
maybe Schwarber has an outside chance
yeah,
of grabbing that from him. But I mean, a lot of these voters, and I'm not a voter this year, but I'm like part of the voting,
well,
the
you
Baseball
should.
Writers Association. Maybe
Yeah,
one day, but that's for that's another topic. But a lot of these voters, like they have 10 spots to fill. A lot of it starts with WAR, and if you look at like Fangraphs WAR, like Trey, I think after Saturday's game, he was the most valuable position player in the National League, and that includes like Otani just as a position player. Like he was above him, and I'm personally someone that doesn't believe in the defensive statistics. Like I think they're kind of nonsense, but the eye
yeah,
test tells you that he is making every play at shortstop, and it's especially important for a team like this that has a lot of pitchers that give up ground balls, rely on getting those double plays to get out of some innings where there's some traffic. He did have a bad play in Monday's game, but for the most part, like this pitching staff can rely on, Trey at shortstop, Bohm at third, Stott at second,
yeah.
Bryce at first base. So, um, I mean, overall, like this is the best Trea Turner season that we've seen in the last 3 years. And it's not like he's been a bad player the last 2 years. There's even that first season, like when he was a terrible hitter for the first 4 months, like he went on an incredible hot streak, something that like we've never really seen before.
It's
But
because
there's always, yeah, yeah, sure. But it feels like with Trey, like there was something missing. Like they signed him to a $300 million contract, but he hasn't been that superstar player that people expected him to be, and he is exactly that this year. I know at the beginning of the year there was not a lot of power. There was a lot of base hits. But some of that power is starting to show up. He might win the National League batting title, which I think should excite a lot of Phillies fans. Um, the defense, like he's stealing bases, like he is the entire package, and it's extremely encouraging for Phillies fans to not only like watch what Schwarber's doing, but what also Trey is doing as well. What that means for the future at shortstop, like he's definitely going to play shortstop next year. Um, I don't really know beyond this year. It depends on just how good he is at the position in 26. But he's made an argument to stay at shortstop, and
Yeah,
it's a pleasant surprise because I think a lot of people going into this year, it's like, oh, he is what he is at shortstop. Like he can make some really nice plays because he's athletic, but he's going to mess up some of those like, you know, hops that are a little bit funny, and he's going to make some costly errors, but he's really eliminated most of that stuff, and it's reflected in like the WAR numbers. And I think like he's going to get some top 5 votes. Like he's going to finish high. He's not going to win the award, but he's going to get the recognition he deserves.
yeah. It's great to see the consistency from him this year. I mean, that's inevitably at the end of the day, that's what you want. I mean, MVP or not, the consistency of Trea Turner has been so welcoming for sure. And if folks, if you're watching us on YouTube, perhaps for the first time, we would greatly appreciate if you would like and subscribe. You can also follow us on our various social media sites. If you're listening to our audio, at Philadelphia PST on the Twitter/X. We are also over on Instagram. You can search us out there. I'm over on TikTok at Mr. Jeff Warren. You can like our Facebook page. We're on Threads. Eric and I are over on Blue Sky at Jeff Warren at Brick Pollitt as well. And our good friend Destiny Lugardo again from PhilliesNation.com. Destiny, can you tell everybody where they can find you on the interwebs out there if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, on Twitter, Destiny_Lugardo, Blue Sky, I think it's just Destiny Lugardo. And then you can read my work on PhilliesNation.com.
Very good. We're going to take a break, folks. We are going to be back in a bit. We got more Phillies talk coming your way. All right, we are back with our good friend Destiny Lugardo from PhilliesNation.com. And look, you all over at Phillies Nation reported on Walker Buehler being signed by the Phillies. Wanted to get into what this means for the pitching, what this means for the rotation, because it essentially does set up possibly that six-man starting rotation in the future. And I have to say, I always try to remain optimistic, but I'm a bit concerned about this after he was just released by the Red Sox. He put up a 5.45 ERA in 23 outings this season. And while he's had 18 postseason starts in his career, Destiny, again, I'm concerned about where he is, given that, he's at 31, entering that latter stage of his career, having a rough 2025 season. Dave Dombrowski obviously is seeing something in him as well as the scouts. So what are your thoughts here on what he may bring to the team?
Yeah, I would just keep expectations low. I know Walker Buehler is a big name. He closed out the World Series. He's had some very, very good seasons with the Dodgers, but he's coming off a really down year in Boston. The swing and miss stuff is just not there. They are going to insert him into a six-man rotation. I think Dave Dombrowski said the date is September 12th against the Kansas City Royals.
Yep.
I think they're really concerned about some of the workload with some of the other starters. And as the Phillies, get down in the stretch run, like they just want to give some of their guys an extra day. I know Rob Thompson said yesterday, Taijuan Walker is one of those guys that could use another day of rest. So I kind of look at this acquisition as something similar to what they did with Noah Syndergaard in 22. He didn't cost a lot in terms of prospect capital, but the Phillies saw some things in him, and he was starting games in the postseason for the Phillies, and he did pretty well. So I think that's like the upside that you're working with. I would assume his role closer to the postseason is something, and this is another like 2022 analogy, but Kyle Gibson was that the bulk guy that if for any reason the Phillies are playing an extra inning game in the playoffs, like he could give you like 4 or 5 innings. Unless he pitches really well, maybe you see him in some high leverage situations. You just never know in the postseason.
Yep.
A lot of things can happen, but it's a low cost move. Like, I guess like what they're losing is maybe they could try out another reliever in that spot. But I believe Buehler signed like a $21 million contract at the beginning of the year. So essentially like the Phillies are paying him league minimum to be like their sixth starter. And I think that's a totally fine flyer to take on a guy that has had postseason success, that has had some really nice success earlier in his career. He might not be the same guy, but he is going to be useful in the role that they're imagining for him. And then you just never know with, Caleb and the pitching staff that they have. Like maybe there are some tweaks that are made and he looks a lot better than what you expected. You never know. There could be a couple injuries in the rotation, and maybe Walker Buehler starting a postseason game for the Phillies.
Oh, gosh.
It's just like you can't really predict what's going to happen, but I think it's a really smart move to add some depth. Like there was a lot of interest around the league, and this wasn't a situation where the Phillies could kind of like, it wasn't like David Robertson where they could just, give him the most amount of money. Like pretty much everyone was in the same boat. So they convinced him that this was the best place for him. And I think he's going to fill an important role down the stretch, not like a matter of like being, pitching high leverage innings, but just being that sixth starter that gives everybody a little bit of a blow.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where he fits into the equation here. And moving along, I mean, the game of baseball, as we know, it has so many ebbs and flows to it. And we have seen that with one Nick Castellanos this season. I mean, he was having such a great season. We talked about consistency before with Harrison Bader, and we've really seen some great consistency with Nick Castellanos for the majority of this 2025 season. But my gosh, just hitting a wall, which has been so frustrating as a fan to watch. What are your thoughts on really what has happened to Nick Castellanos here?
Such a great question. And I like how you mentioned consistency, because I think that's what Nick has brought.
Yes.
Dating back to May 2024, after his really bad slump to begin the year. He was just a guy that didn't fall into a slump. Yeah. And he got off to a very good start this year. I remember in April, like he was
He was on
was
fire.
walking and like he was
Yes.
hitting for power, working good at bats, and we're like, who is this guy? Like this is incredible. And then it just seems like he's really struggled since the beginning of July. Um, his last extra base hit was like August 22nd. Like the power is just not there anymore. And I think the Phillies are starting to lose a little bit of patience when it comes to Castellanos. I remember, and we were talking about, acquiring Bader close to the trade deadline. They weren't touching right field. Like they were
Right.
pretty insistent that Nick is an everyday guy and that they're
Yep.
going to wait for him to get hot. And then they're definitely not doing that anymore. So I think it has to do with like if he's going to be the defender that he is in right field, then you need to be like one of the best hitters in the lineup, and he's just not that guy anymore. Um, I don't know what they are going to do. Like I think it would be smart to give him a chance to heat up a little bit. And I know it's
Like
like
it's
we've been
in there.
saying that for
Yeah.
it
It's in
there
there.
has to be like more in there than what he's shown the last couple of months. But like if you don't really see anything in September, then I don't think he has like a major role in the postseason. Um, so yeah, like I think like in center field, Bader's the everyday guy. They're doing a straight platoon with Marsh and Weston Wilson in left field, and then right field is not. I wouldn't call it a platoon because Nick is still facing some right-handed starters, but it's more of a timeshare with Kepler
Yeah.
and Castellanos. So I think like they should continue doing that, and then hope Nick like kind of figures it out. I do think his last few games, like the at bats have been a lot better. Like you noticed a couple. I think yesterday he might have had a couple walks or 2 days ago against the Braves. So like he's swinging at the first pitch a little bit less. The results just aren't there. Um, so yeah, it's a it's a tough situation
It is.
because you do need like a hot Nick Castellanos, but
Yeah.
if it's not there, then they probably need to pivot to a different plan, which is probably Mark Kepler in right field.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Destiny, before I let you go, my friend, I mean, this team, they certainly have some challenges for sure. Then again, so does every other Major League Baseball team at this point in the season. What do you see the Philadelphia Phillies' biggest challenge being over this month of September as they're really looking toward the postseason here to close us out?
Yeah, Rob Thompson would definitely say health. I would agree
Yeah.
with him too. Just make sure your starters, for one, are healthy, especially with Zach Wheeler out. I think the only guys on the injured list are Zach Wheeler and Jordan Romano. Not
Yeah.
sure Jordan Romano will even pitch again this year.
I
But
think it's likely not.
yeah, I think that's probably where he's going to stay
Yeah.
on that injured list. But yeah, they got to wrap up that bye. And I know like this could be a debate that we have down the line, like whether it's better to get the bye and go straight to the division series or to play in the wild card round. I think like if you knew that you won in the wild card round, then you wouldn't take the bye. But I do think the bye is very useful for them this year because they could set up the pitching the way they want. But yeah, it's just I think it's simple. Just keep everybody healthy and then wrap up the bye. And then I think a problem last year too was that, and this kind of goes back to them like getting off to this very hot start and then also struggling at the end. Like it feels like the playoffs kind of crept up on them.
Yeah.
I would like to see a team, and I don't know if it's like winning more games the last week of the year. Like I would like to see a team that looks prepared to play in October because it didn't seem that way last year.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And let's talk about that more on the show, folks, and let us know what you are thinking as well about where this team is going to be headed here in September. Philadelphia Sports Table at gmail.com. We'd love to read your email here on the show and respond to it. And always great having you on, Destiny. Thank you so much for taking the time. Again, folks, PhilliesNation.com. That's where Destiny and her colleagues put up fantastic content about this Philadelphia Phillies team. My friend, thank you so much. And come back, join us. I'd love to have you back on the show again.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it.